Welcome back to the Safe Secure 360 podcast. There is safety in numbers. Today we're talking about a family plan of what you would do in an emergency or a crisis, developing a simple safety plan for your family and how that can make a big difference in how things go during that time. This is the Safe Secure 360 podcast. There is safety in numbers.
The information provided in our podcasts is for general information uses only and is not intended as legal advice. The views and opinions expressed by the guests are their own. Always consult with a qualified professional before making safety and security decisions. For more information about this topic, check out our website at safesecure360.com.
Well, thank you for walking us through this today, Robert. My wife and I just bought our first home this year, and so this is another one of so many of these topics are happening in my life. I imagine other people are feeling this way too, but we don't really have that great of a safety plan now that I have been talking with you about this. Walk me through the steps of what we would need to go from if something happens, we'll figure it out, to having a response plan for something that could come up.
Okay, let's talk about two different scenarios. One is a person's related interest or thing or crime that could occur. The other is a property-related crime or something that could occur. So let's talk about the property crimes and prevention steps you can take at your home to make things safer for you and to have preventative things done that would limit someone victimizing your home, breaking into it, damaging your property, doing something that you would not want to have done. So my advice generally for a new homeowner would be, number one, you purchased this home. It may not have been built new, but if it was, certainly you could do this as well. I would change all of the locks. Have the locks either changed or rekeyed to where you know that you're the only person or whoever you give keys to that has a key to that lock. That's very important. If you're using an electronic lock, change the code. And remember that code is just like a key. So be very careful who you give it to. I think that installing a home alarm system that may have cameras attached with it is a great idea. The alarm system and the camera system provides additional levels of safety for you in security, mind, peacefulness, because when you're not there, the cameras are watching, or when you are there and you're asleep or not paying attention to what's going on around or the outside of the house, the camera does that for you. It can capture things. It can also alert you if something is happening during the field of view that you're interested in. Also, the alarm can detect if someone makes an entry, if a door is open or a window is open. So I think step one would be to change your locks or rekey all the doors. Installing an alarm system is another great step. The third thing really is pretty fundamental, but go around to each one of your windows and make sure that your windows are locked. Take a look at the locks and make sure they're fully engaged. Try them and make sure that they're locked. That's a simple step, but sometimes people that victimize homes will just raise a window that's been left unlocked or open and go inside. I think another step that you can take is look at your home at night and your lighting situation. Do you have external lights around your house? Are they adequate? Are they burned out? Are they a low wattage? Or are they a proper wattage so you can clearly see around your house? Are they LED, which I recommend because they last a very long time, and the brightness can be purchased by you depending on how many lumens? or how many watts you want at the time. So I think lights are very important to have. Is your address easy to see from the road? It seems like something that everyone overlooks, but it's very important to a first responder or to your mailman or woman or someone delivering a package to you. Do they have to guess your number or do they clearly see it? I think having a clear address marker or one on your mailbox if you have one and one on your house for sure is a great idea. Because if a first responder is coming to your home, they don't know where you live. They know a number and they're looking for it, but make it easy for them to see. That's very important. If you have a gate or a fence or some type of wooden fence or some type of chain link fence or some type of barrier around your house, make sure that it is in good shape. Take a moment and look at it and make sure that it's not cut or damaged in any way. You may want to think about a lock mechanism for that gate at night or whenever you're away. You can lock that gate. It can be as simple as a bike lock, like on a cable that you can wrap around your gate and lock it, and that will do wonders for basic crime prevention for you. How about your landscaping? Does it appear that your bushes or bedding plants are very high and they could secret someone behind them if they got in behind them? Are they lower than the windows where you can clearly see out the window? Or do they obstruct the view of someone if they were by a window or hiding by a window? How about your window coverings or blinds? Do you have them? And are you adequately using them? During the daytime, obviously, you may want the light to come in, but at night, my advice would be to close or limit them because it restricts the view of someone who may want to look in your home that shouldn't be. That's another very important step. Do you have pets? Pets, especially some pets, like a Chihuahua that comes to mind, are very good at their job of alerting you if something unusual occurs or something happens in their territory that they don't like. They'll let you know. So having a pet is a real good idea also. But I think that all of these different components all come back to what is your plan? Do you have a safety plan for your family? What happens if the power goes out? What happens if there is some type of fire in your home where you have to leave? What happens if someone tries to break in your home? What do you do? What's your role? What's your wife's role, your husband's role? Are there children? Are there pets? Is there an alarm? Is there a firearm in the home? Have you rehearsed and talked about a simple safety plan that either allows you to remain and shelter in place or allows you to evacuate or leave your home, depending on what the circumstances are? It doesn't have to be a complex safety plan. It can simply be, if we had an emergency, we would all come to this room, or we would all go to this area, or we would all leave immediately through this way. And how would that look and how would that work? Kind of like a fire drill that you've had in school or at work. What would we do? It doesn't have to be complicated or written down. It can just be a conversation and an agreement with your family that maybe needs to be reviewed maybe once a year. Remember now, if we have this happen, here's what we would do. I think that's very important. But do your own home survey. Look around your house. Look for things that make it harder for someone to victimize you. Look around your house and make sure that the things you have in place are good. Close your garage door when you're not using your garage door. That's very important. maybe instruct your Amazon or package delivery person to leave packages in a place that's not really visible to others. Right now, as the holiday season approaches, it's very important to do that. We did a separate podcast on holiday shopper safety, and we talked a lot about package delivery as well. I encourage you to take a look at that if you have time. SAFESECURE 360. We are a security consulting group located in the Woodlands, Texas. We assist our multiple clients by reducing their risk, loss, and reputation impact. We also do full security assessments on their facilities, large churches, large private schools in Texas, and we want to help you. Take a look at our website, safesecure360.com.
I hear you saying basically there's a shelter-in-place type scenario. That could be, we had just in the last year, we had the power went out for several weeks throughout Texas. And then in the last couple of years, we had a big freeze that, again, put the power out for a week. These are more shelter-in-place, weather condition type events that all of a sudden you realize maybe you don't have such a good plan for. And then the other one is where you're going to need to pick up and go somewhere. If the house is burning, you're probably going to want to at least stay in a hotel that night and get out of town. Or if the house floods, or there's lots of different reasons why you'd want to leave. So when I'm talking to my family about a plan, maybe it's a good idea for me to say, hey, we need to know what we're going to do if we're going to stay here. We need to know what we're going to do if we're going to go. Is that the right way of thinking about this?
Yes. Many of the scenarios that you talked about are much more common than someone using violence or force or harming someone or trying to harm someone. In Texas, we have a lot of natural disaster things that occur. You mentioned the freeze we had. Thank goodness that's not very often, but that really paralyzed our state. The people that live in the Northeast or live in the North or Midwest, they're used to snow and they're used to icing conditions and they're used to all those things that go with it. In Texas, we're not. So it devastated me and my family. We were just absolutely shut down. We did not have, at that time, a home standby generator. We do now. We did not have a lot of extra water stored in our home. We do now. We did not have excess medicine that we may need. We do now. We didn't have adequate amount of pet foods. We have several pets that we feed, and they have medical medicine they may take as well. And I think it's really important if you have to shelter in place for any length of time, maybe more than 24 hours to 72 hours, having some of these things there are critically important. Having a standby, even a battery power source that can last, maybe solarly powered, is a great idea. You can plug in a space heater or you can plug in a fan if it's hot or cold, either way. But I really encourage people to look into a standby generator. It really makes a big difference. Or even a portable generator that you can use to keep your food sources cold and cool you down as well. So I think that what is the plan? You should ask yourself and your family, if we had to shelter in place for 48 or 72 hours, what will we eat? Do we have adequate water? Do we have medicine? And do we have things that, a first aid kit? Do we have things that we need to be able to sustain ourselves during that time period? And if you don't, then you should go shopping and make a list of things that you may want to have. One of them certainly is water. So the other side of the house is what if you had to evacuate? What if you had to leave? What if you had to go somewhere because your house was compromised, or there was some type of flooding, or there could have been a lightning strike, a fire, many things that could have made you leave. What are you taking with you? I recommend making it's almost like a medical term or a military term, a go bag. A go bag is something that contains things that you would need if you were displaced from your home. And I guess you could make one for 24 hours, 48 hours, 72 hours, times the number of persons that are going with you. Do you have fuel for your vehicle? Do you have some extra fuel on standby in your house in a gas can or some way to fuel your vehicle if the fuel supply was cut off? What would you do? How would you drive? Do you have some place to go? Have you thought about a location where you would go? Is it a friend, a family member? Is it some place, a hotel? Is it some place that you could access, that you could go to if the roads were passable? So this go bag that you're taking with you is going to have similar components as what you have if you stayed at home. You need water. You need some type of food source. You need some type of warming instrument, blankets, a portable space heater, something that can be powered to warm you. So I think that that's important. What about your personal safety? Do you have a firearm? Are you experienced and trained in the use of a firearm? Are you a licensed to carry person? Is that firearm available, and can it be transported safely where you're going? And have you thought about how that would work and how that would look? So I think those are important steps. The go bag certainly would have your medicine in it, a first aid kit, some additional clothing. It could have a crank radio that doesn't use batteries, a flashlight, certainly, a heat source, very important, matches, lighters. Those are all important if you had to start a fire. And then the first aid kit, very important as well. Maybe not just an off-the-shelf one, but one maybe that has a tourniquet, and one that may have some type of water purification, like a life straw, or something where if you had water that you weren't sure if it was pure enough to drink, you could filter it to drink. Water is a critical component of what you would want to have access to. So I think once you satisfy your need for water, food, shelter, safety, now you're on the road to stabilizing yourself with a food source then, for that 72-hour period or perhaps longer.
You can't guess everything that's going to happen, but what are good ways of preparing myself for different possibilities that might come up in a weather event or a reason I would need to evacuate? How can I prepare a mindset for myself to be ready when something like that, if it happens?
Yeah, we're in Texas and the Gulf Coast, and so we know that typically from June until November is hurricane season. And if you live on the coast or if you live inland in the Gulf Coast area, the probability of a hurricane or tropical storm that's severe or extended amounts of rain or flooding is very possible, if not probable, during a hurricane season. So I remember when we were threatened with a hurricane, I believe it was Alicia, that really had an incredible response in Houston, for everyone wanted to evacuate to the north and to the west. And I remember just 1 million people plus just deciding we're leaving. And they got in their cars and just took off thinking that they were going to have a clear path to wherever they were going. Well, 1 million other people had the same idea. And so our infrastructure of highways was not ready for that. So you had vehicles that were traveling a mile in an hour, or a trip that would take you 1 hour was now taking 8 hours. There were reports of people who got their elderly parents or relatives in their vehicle during this evacuation attempt, and they just died in the car. And no one could get to them to help them. So it's serious to think about. And they brought no provisions with them except maybe their clothes. That's all they really brought with them. They didn't have additional fuel source. They didn't have any additional gas. The gas stations were empty and gone. The stores were empty. So we're really in a fragile, time where if our food sources and our fuel sources are interrupted and our water sources are interrupted, that's going to be a real challenge for us. And we haven't been tested in that way, but only a few times. But it's an uncomfortable feeling not to be in control, not to have all those conveniences and all those things at your fingertips that you normally do. So if it's response to a natural event, the outcomes are unpredictable. So my advice would be take the advice that we gave about a safety plan and about an evacuation destination and route, but you have to do it extremely early, because if you wait, everyone else will be there with you and it will just be impassable.
You're right. Acting early, responding early to a weather situation, for instance, is a good way to get you out of town. If you can grab your go bag, you got stuff you need, and you can go before everybody decides that they want to put their clothes together. You're in an advantage to where you may not get stuck in as much traffic getting out. You may have an easier route to your destination.
Yes. Not only is there a time advantage, you're prepared because you have those things in that bag and you have that additional fuel source and you have that food and water and ability to stay warm and start a fire and protect yourself. All of those components together gives you a unique advantage over someone who is just decided, let's get out of here and join the other 1-2 million people who had the same thought close to the event versus a pre-planned strategy with equipment that's enacted far before everyone else is. That's going to be the successful approach.
We've talked a lot about evacuation. What about shelter in place? What events might cause this, and is there something different than evacuating that we should prepare for?
Shelter in place may not be a choice, but a destination, because you can't leave. When we had the terrible snow event here and the freezing event, you couldn't leave. And guess what? Amazon's not coming. And Uber Eats is not coming. No one's moving because the roads are just shut down. They're impassable. And when people try to drive in snow and sleet and tough road conditions that aren't experienced at it, it's not good because they don't really understand the dynamics of driving in that type of weather. And a lot of motor vehicle accidents occur during that time. But as I always say, honor our first responders because they're still out there driving. They have no choice. They are there and they're doing their job, and we have to value them. But if you have to stay inside, the same thing applies. You know, do you have food, water? Do you have a fuel source? Do you have a generator? Do you have a space heater? Do you have an electrical source? Do you have a crank radio or flashlights or a lantern? What do you do? I'll tell you, during the big freeze here in Texas, I have a gas operated fireplace, and that's all I had. The power was out, the water was affected, and it was very cold. And I remember huddling around that little fireplace, and it just took us through the entire event. It was wonderful in its own way, but I don't want to repeat that. But if you're not prepared for this and you don't talk about it and develop a basic safety plan for all of these scenarios, you're going to be in the reaction mode versus a response that you've already talked about.
So we've talked about a plan for sheltering, a plan for getting out of town. How else do we plan? Is there anything else we should prepare for when it comes to family? Like some of these things could apply for a family road trip. Is it a good idea to take my go bag when I go out of town with the family? We may not need it, but how do I, on a smaller scale, there's no emergency, but I'm just going 3 or 4 hours away with the family all in one car. We're going to go see grandma at her house. Does any of this apply to that scenario there?
A planned short duration trip would have a less fully approached preparation bag. You may have a few extra bottles of water in your vehicle. You may have a lighter. You may have things that you may need in there. Typically, you may not travel that short of a distance with medication or food supply. You may have snacks or things like that that may help you. But I think thinking ahead about the duration of how long you're going to be, and then being globally aware of your community and how that's going to impact you. Like, I heard the weather forecast was a hurricane may be entering the Gulf of Mexico, but we're going on this 3-hour road trip. Are we sure we're ready? If something able to come back and go again, can we do it? Will that work? But here's something I want to talk about that's really important. It's making connections in your community, in your street, in your block where you live, or your apartment where you live with other people. If you had to leave your house, could you go to their house? Is there an agreement that you can make to trusted friends that if you had to evacuate for whatever reason, is their house a refuge or a rally point where you could go, even temporarily? Is that a good idea? Maybe they have a space heaters more than you. Maybe they have a generator. I don't know. But could that be something that would help you through this crisis? Maybe they have some type of training or background or experience that you don't have, but you have dissimilar backgrounds and training and experience that they don't have. So I think getting together with them and dealing with this as a group may have advantages versus just you and your family out on your own.
I remember in a freeze, I was living in an apartment and one person had a little propane heater and everybody came out of their apartments to sit around and cook. Everybody brought meat out and veggies and whatever, and we made a feast out of that. I didn't ever see any of those people again, but that one time where we all needed each other, there were more people wanting to share in that than not. So I think that's a really valuable thing, to not just think in isolation about yourself, but when something unexpected happens, there's so many people around you affected by that.
Yes, the key to it is planning ahead of time and making those agreements and those deals and those cooperative engagements before you have to do it. And that is the key. So I think that that's a real good approach, involving other trusted friends, neighbors, associates who can agree that if we have a crisis occur, we're going to be okay. Here's why. Because this is your role, this is your role, here's where we're going to go, here's our water source, here's our food source, here's our safety force. All of that together is a great idea. Safety in numbers.
That is absolutely right. Well, thank you, Robert. I so appreciate talking about this. This is something that this year and last year and the year before, I experienced some of these things. So it's nice to be able to talk through them in a reasonable way and feel more prepared. As always, we're so grateful for you, and we hope that this podcast and the information in it is helpful to your life and helps the world feel more safe to you. If you would, go ahead and like and subscribe, leave a comment, and tell us what you want to see more of. We're happy to be here with you, and this has been the Safe Secure 360 podcast. There is safety in numbers.